my name is Major Jack Daniels. I'm 44 years old, and I've served in the United States Army for over 2 decades. I've led missions across 3 continents, trained officers who now command their own units, and earned every stripe on my uniform through sweat and clarity under fire. So when Colonel Baines called me into his office that morning, I didn't think much of it. Just another strategy meeting or maybe a status update before deployment rotations. He didn't look me in the eye when I sat down. That should have tipped me off. He cleared his throat and said they were moving me into an advisory role. Effective immediately. Said it like it was a gift, like I should thank him for being put out to pasture while still in my prime. I waited for the rest, but it hit me like a punch when he told me I'd been replaced. The new officer was Lieutenant Kevin Barnes, 29, fast-tracked through leadership programs, tech-savvy, full of what they called modern perspective. I knew of him. A sharp resume and a lot of classroom hours, but not a single tour that put boots in mud or made your hands shake after pulling a soldier out of crossfire. I felt my jaw tighten as I listened. My mind went quiet but not empty. It was a kind of silence that builds right before a storm. I wasn't angry at Kevin. He didn't make the decision, but I couldn't shake the feeling that experience had just been traded in for energy and loyalty for optics. They gave me a handshake and a thin smile, said the team would still benefit from my knowledge in an advisory capacity, like I'd be some old book gathering dust on a shelf they could reference if things got messy. I smiled back, not because I agreed, but because I knew I'd never forget this moment. As I walked out, the weight of it settled in. 20 years of service, and I was just another name on a roster shift. But something inside me didn't crumble, it sharpened. Because if they thought that was the end of my story, they hadn't been paying attention. The first time I saw Lieutenant Kevin Barnes take charge of a briefing, I sat 2 rows back and watched in silence. He stood stiff, overconfident, rattling off assignments like he was reading instructions off a cereal box. The room was quiet, but not in the way it usually was before deployment. It was the silence of people trying to process confusion without showing it. He skipped the weather report entirely, didn't mention terrain or comms frequency backups. When he dismissed the unit, they hesitated for a half-second. Enough for me to see that they were unsure, not scared. Not yet, just unsteady. That was worse. Later that day, I passed Sergeant Morales in the hallway. She gave me a look. I gave one back. We both knew Kevin had missed critical steps, and nobody wanted to be the one to correct him outright. That job, apparently, fell to me now, even if nobody had said it aloud. The next day, he walked right past Corporal Jenkins without returning salute. Maybe he didn't see it. Maybe he thought rank and tradition were flexible concepts now. Either way, Jenkins held his salute a little too long, then dropped it with a look I didn't like. It wasn't disrespect, it was doubt. Kevin came into my office that afternoon, asked if I had notes on his briefing. I gave him a few. Kept it neutral. Logistics, not leadership. He nodded like he appreciated it, then immediately repeated the same mistakes 2 hours later in another prep meeting. I sat in the back again, arms crossed, biting my tongue so hard it almost bled. By the end of the week, I started hearing the murmurs. Not loud, not organized. Just whispers from soldiers double-checking orders, questioning if Barnes really meant what he said. A few were covering for him, adjusting protocols in the field without reporting it. That's where the danger creeps in. Not from bullets, but from blurred lines. He messed up radio check protocols during a nighttime drill, sent Bravo team out without confirming comms encryption. They got scrambled mid-exercise and spent half an hour wandering near restricted perimeter zones. I was in the control room the whole time, watching the blip disappear off the screen. My fingers twitched near the emergency override switch. I didn't hit it. Later, Barnes brushed it off like a glitch. Told the team to run it back the next morning, never acknowledged the risk. Never asked what could have happened if those zones were live. That's when I started keeping notes. Not for revenge, not even for leverage. For protection. Mine, theirs, his. At night, I'd lie awake thinking about all the missions I'd led. The weight of every decision I ever made, how every order had consequences. Kevin hadn't felt that yet. He thought wearing the uniform was the same as earning it. It wasn't. My frustration grew, but it didn't burn hot. It settled cold in my chest. I wasn't angry at the kid. I was angry at the system that thought leadership could be outsourced to youth and buzzwords. I watched him stumble through decisions with too much confidence and too little context, and I kept quiet. Not because I didn't care, but because interfering too early might only make it worse. Each day under Kevin's command felt like watching a tightrope walker on a windy day. You want to yell out to tell them they're swaying too far, but you can't. Not yet. Not unless you're ready to catch them when they fall. And I wasn't sure anyone else would. It was supposed to be a simple urban extraction drill. Simulated hostiles, one wounded soldier, tight perimeter, all under controlled conditions. Kevin was in charge, giving orders over comms with the kind of confidence that didn't match the complexity of the setup. I stood at the edge of the control tent, arms crossed, watching the monitor. Something felt off. His timing was rushed, overlapping commands, skipping the recon pass entirely. No visual confirmation before sending Alpha Squad into the building. My stomach tightened. Inside the simulation zone, the team split at the wrong point. A left turn instead of a right, straight into a staged explosive trap. One soldier tripped the pressure plate. The sensor registered it. On the screen, red lights blinked. In real time, that would have been a casualty. Kevin didn't even notice. He was too busy shouting corrections into the radio, layering instructions, confusing the team. They stopped responding. I could see it happening, second by second. Confusion spreading like smoke. One wrong call, and they'd breached the wrong door. I stepped forward without thinking. My voice cut through the radio chatter, calm and direct. Redirect Alpha South. Wait for Bravo to reach visual contact. Confirm before breach. Silence followed. Then movement. The teams adjusted. The drill ended 5 minutes later with no incident. On paper, success. Kevin called it a win. I said nothing. But the look from Sergeant Morales told me everything. She knew I'd stepped in. They all did. I wasn't supposed to interfere. I was just there to advise. But I couldn't watch good soldiers walk into a bad plan. That night, I sat in my bunk replaying every second of the op. How close we came to something going horribly wrong. The worst part wasn't Kevin's decisions. It was how easy it would have been for the system to call it a fluke. Blame training, stress, or faulty equipment. But I knew the truth. His leadership had cracks, and those cracks had nearly cost someone their life. I'd stepped in once, quietly. Next time, I might not get the chance. The next morning, I got called into the colonel's office. He didn't raise his voice, didn't need to. The message was clear. I'd overstepped. My role was advisory. What happened yesterday was a breach of chain of command, even if I'd kept the team from walking into a disaster. I sat there, nodding like I understood, like I agreed. I didn't. My pulse stayed steady, but inside, something pulled tight. Not anger. Not yet. Just a deep, quiet sting. Like being told to sit down after saving someone from drowning. Kevin never spoke up. Never said a word in that meeting or afterward. He walked past me in the hallway like nothing had happened. No thanks. No acknowledgement. I kept waiting for him to look me in the eye. He didn't. The reprimand wasn't written. Just a conversation. But in the military, that's enough. Word gets around. You're seen as someone who doesn't know his place. A shadow of what you used to be. I felt it in the way soldiers started looking past me, not toward me. That afternoon, I sat alone in my office. Small, square, with a window that faced the back lot. The same window I'd stared out years ago when I was leading full units. Now I was just watching others move forward. I wasn't sad. I was done being sad. Something hardened in me. A switch flipped. If they didn't want my help, I'd stop offering it. But I wasn't going to disappear. Not yet. I started taking mental notes. Not just on Kevin's decisions, but on patterns. Missteps. Who covered for who? Who knew better and stayed silent? The betrayal didn't burn hot. It cooled me, focused me. I realized then this wasn't just a personnel mistake. It was a leadership vacuum, and sooner or later, it would collapse. I wasn't going to push it. I was going to be ready when it did. It was past 0100 when the knock came on my door. I was already awake, sitting in the dark, reviewing mission specs out of habit. Greg stood there, his face pale, eyes sunken. He didn't have to say much. A mission had gone sideways. Team Bravo was out in the field, and they'd lost comms. One soldier hadn't checked in after the sweep. Private Lopez. 18 months in, solid track record. Now gone silent in an unstable zone. The command center was running on fumes, people moving but not speaking. Panic hadn't exploded, it just hovered like fog. Greg asked me to come in. Didn't apologize, didn't explain, just said he needed help. I didn't hesitate. I pulled on my jacket and followed him across the compound. My boots hit the pavement like I was back on active duty. My breath steady, my thoughts sharp. Inside ops, the room was dim. Kevin sat at the head of the table, hands clasped, staring at the floor. He looked like a man who had just learned how little control he actually had. The other officers barely acknowledged him. Their eyes turned to me when I entered. I reviewed the intel fast. Their last ping showed Bravo moving along Route Delta, but Kevin had changed the extraction point mid-mission. Weather conditions had shifted, comms were patchy. Nobody knew where Lopez was. Nobody had a plan. I kept my voice calm, pulled up a map, started asking direct questions. Who'd last seen Lopez? Who confirmed his location? Silence filled in the blanks Kevin couldn't. I pointed to a zone near the tree line. If he doubled back, this is where he'd go. I gave orders. Not loudly, not harshly, just clear, like I had 100 times before. Greg didn't stop me. Kevin didn't interrupt. I wasn't there for rank. I was there because someone had to be. And they all knew it. As the rescue team geared up, I stayed near the comms desk, listening for the static to break. Every second stretched. Somewhere out there, a soldier waited. And for the first time in months, I felt the weight of responsibility return to my shoulders. It felt heavy, but right. I took charge without asking. Mapped the rescue in 10 minutes flat. Pulled 2 squads from standby and restructured them into tight units. Sent one toward the ridgeline to sweep the tree cover. The other cut through the ravine with thermal support. Timing mattered. So did tone. I kept my voice even, deliberate, firm. I briefed them like I'd done 1,000 times before. Emphasized patience, precision, and discipline. Reminded them that fear can cloud judgment, but calm saves lives. No theatrics. Just the kind of clarity they hadn't felt in weeks. I saw it in their faces. Shoulders squaring, heads nodding. They trusted me, not because of rank, but because I made them believe again. Half an hour later, radio crackled. Found him. Lopez was alive, dehydrated, disoriented, but walking. The team wrapped him up and confirmed the extract. I didn't celebrate, I just exhaled for the first time that night. Not because we got lucky, but because we did it right. Back at base, the relief was quiet. Nobody clapped or cheered, just a room full of soldiers who could finally breathe. Kevin stood off to the side, his face pale, hands in his pockets. He walked over, slow, and nodded. That nod said everything. He knew I knew. We wouldn't speak about it, but the balance had shifted. Greg clapped me on the shoulder, softer than before. He didn't say thank you. He didn't have to. I wasn't looking for credit. I didn't need a title to lead. I needed a mission. And for the first time in months, I remembered what it felt like to matter. I stayed back while the others helped Lopez to medical. Watched them move with purpose again. Watched them carry each other like they used to. I wasn't bitter anymore. I felt steady. Recentered. That night, I didn't sleep much. But for once, it wasn't from restlessness. It was from clarity. It was time to lead again. On my own terms, Greg called me into his office 3 days after the rescue. The tone was different this time. No clipped words or measured glances. just a man trying to fix what he broke. He leaned back in his chair, laced his fingers, and offered me command. Full authority. My old role, back on the table. I looked at him for a long second, not out of hesitation, but to make sure I chose my words carefully. I thanked him, said I appreciated the offer, but I wasn't coming back. His face didn't move, but I could tell he hadn't seen that answer coming. He opened his mouth, maybe to ask why, but I didn't give him the chance. I told him about the training center. Quiet land out past Arlington I'd already leased, 2 buildings up, a third on the way. I was putting together a program for vets transitioning out and young recruits who wanted more than just textbook drills. They needed real prep. They needed to learn how to think, not just follow. He sat back, hands still, listening harder now. I told him how some of the younger officers had already reached out, said they wanted to train under me, not above me. They wanted to learn how to lead without losing who they were. That meant more than any promotion. I didn't want to chase approval anymore. I just wanted to build something that mattered. Greg nodded, said he understood. I think part of him did. Maybe the rest would catch up later. We shook hands. His grip was firm but slower than usual, like he knew this chapter was closing. I left the office lighter than I'd entered. The center was still rough around the edges, floors unfinished, gear still arriving. But every time I stepped into the main hall, I felt purpose rise like heat through concrete. We had 3 new recruits show up last week, all sharp, all hungry. None of them cared about titles. They just wanted truth and clarity. Some nights, I stay late and run drills alone. Not because I miss the old job, but because I finally feel like I'm doing something real, something honest. I don't need a command post to lead. I just need space to teach and hands that are willing to learn. Greg sent one last message before I cut ties for good. Said the door's always open. I didn't reply. Not because I was angry, just because I'd already stepped through a better one. I'm not walking backward. Not anymore. I stood by the edge of the dirt lot, arms crossed, watching a group of trainees push through the final leg of a ruck march. Their boots kicked up dust, their breath heavy, but their eyes stayed forward. None of them were perfect. That wasn't the point. They showed up. They listened. They cared. The buildings behind me were nothing fancy, just clean walls and a roof that held everything we needed. A chalkboard, a rack of gear, and the kind of silence that demanded focus. Every scratch on that floor was earned. Every bruise and mistake part of something better taking shape. I don't wear my old rank around here. Don't need to. What I built isn't about the past. It's about what's next. About leading without ego, teaching without shouting, and giving a damn when it counts. Because leadership isn't about being the loudest in the room. It's about knowing when to speak and when to step up, when to stand back and let others rise. I've led with medals on my chest and doubt in my gut. I've followed orders that didn't make sense just to protect those who counted on me. But now I get to lead from a place that feels right, clean, real. I don't need anyone's title to know I've done the work. This time, I'm in charge. And not because someone handed me a key, but because I built the damn door. Leadership is earned in the hard spaces. In silence, in sweat, in sacrifice, and it doesn't come with age or titles. It comes with courage, clarity, and care. That's what I teach now. That's what I live by.